boy. Hey, Noah. This is JT. Open the door, man. Hey, Noah. Open the door, man. Hey, Shem. Ham. Come on, man. Y'all guys open the door up. Stop playing around, man. Man, stop playing. You don't want me to come up in there. Just turn your latch and let me in. Oh, too late? Okay. All right, man.
You're listening to The Critical Thought, where we challenge our listeners to use critical thinking when examining the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Hi, this is Lady C. Welcome to The Critical Thoughts. While you may chuckle about that intro, actually, there's a deeper story behind it. In this episode of The Critical Thought, JT is going to talk about some of the Watchtower teachings that are constantly and ever changing.
You know, when I was at Bethel, the annual meeting was always special because it gave the Bethelites a chance to see and visit with all the most important Jehovah's Witnesses from around the world. And it was a place and a time where you would hear all kinds of experiences that you could then work into your talks. But today, the governing body uses the annual meeting literally to use what's called floating trial balloons. And what is that? You see, all of our lives as Jehovah's Witnesses, we were taught that the Watchtower magazine, yes, the Watchtower magazine, is the organ that Jehovah God is using to teach his people. Instead, what we're seeing taking place at the annual meeting is the Watchtower is releasing new teachings, new doctrines before it even gets into the magazine. Now, why is it of interest? Well, what happens when you have something that is spoken verbally and only a few people know about it? The Watchtower writers and the governing body, they know that these people who attend these meetings are going to go back home and tell these stories. Now, they'll have no documentation. And what it does, it gives the Watchtower time to see what type of reaction they're going to get back as feedback. These guys are good. Well, this year did not disappoint at all. Once again, new light. As Lady C pointed out, we did a little comical skit because that skit really represents a lot. It represents a major change in their teachings. You see, all of my life, all of my wife's life, and interestingly, all of the lives of many of you who are watching this video, we were told by Jehovah's Witnesses, just the governing body, that once the Great Tribulation breaks out, it's over with. You can't get in.
Oh, too late? Okay. All right, man.
And for that reason, that is why they would often use the case of Noah's Ark. That once the doors were closed and that first drop of water hit somebody in the forehead, there was no way to get on that boat. No way at all. And they told us that once the Great Tribulation breaks out, can't get in. And what impact has it had? That is the real reason why when something around the world breaks out, Jehovah's Witnesses, old Bible studies, inactive witnesses, they run back to the hall in fear. And what are they afraid of? Because they've been taught all their life, if I'm not in it before the Great Tribulation starts, I'm toast. That's what they've been taught all of their lives. And then here we have it now at the annual meeting. A member of the governing body lets everybody know, you got plenty of time. You got plenty of time. Now, why is this of interest? Well, these are basically fundamental changes of teachings of God. You see, I've always found it fascinating how the governing body and the Watchtower writers do things. We often refer to it as taking human opinion, elevating it to divine status, and then throwing it in the trash next week. Well, this once again is a perfect example. That is why we refer to this video as, are they simply just making it up as they go along? Well, the answer is very clear. Yes, they are. They have no more idea about what will and will not happen than Fred, but yet they present themselves as if they do. My wife and I, we did a number of videos on speculation. Why does the governing body always speculate? And we took their own published material to show that one of the reasons that people speculate is to give the appearance as if they know something that nobody else knows. They have some special connection to God that nobody else has. That is what the Watchtower says is the reason that people speculate. Is it not ironic that nobody speculates as much about what will and will not happen than the governing body, the writing department? This organization, interestingly, has built many of its teachings literally, and I use that word, literally, of nothing but speculation. And those speculations are converted to teachings of God. Anyone, any elder, any circuit overseer, any publisher who went to someone's home as a Bible study and said, the Watchtower does say that when the Great Tribulation breaks out, you won't be able to get in. But we don't really know. Anybody who made a public statement like that will be sitting in the back room in a judicial case. You would have been brought up on charges of apostasy. See, this is what makes it so interesting. The Watchtower will, when they shift something from a teaching of God, they always use these little phrases like, our view has changed, our understanding has changed. But see, here's the problem. When the Watchtower presents information, they never present it as, this is merely our viewpoint, our opinion, this is what we think it means. No. When the Watchtower publishes something, they publish it as teachings of God. And this is the problem. When you sign God's name to something, you don't get a chance to back out and hit reverse. The Watchtower in this particular annual meeting, they talked about Ezekiel, the eyes within the wheels. Now, as a Jehovah's Witness kid growing up, nothing scared me more than the book of Ezekiel talking about those eyes within those wheels. And many of you who are watching this video right now, you were kids when you grew up and you heard those stories about those eyes in those wheels. And I remember circuit overseers and speakers would come to our hall and they would say, young people, those eyes are watching you. They're watching you at school. They're watching you with your worldly friends, and you were scared to death. It's amazing how those eyes were watching children 7 and 8 years old as to whether or not they were going to eat a cupcake or not. And yet those same eyes could not keep an organization on the highway. Instead, they're running all down the ditch. They're hitting reverse, backing up because they're teaching things that are wrong. It is absolutely amazing how the Watchtower will say, we are being directed by the Spirit of God. These angels, the cherubs, they're leading us. The eyes are guiding us. And then they come up with something wrong. You see, that's what makes part of being a critical thinker, because you quickly realize that makes no sense. If all of these eyes are watching everything, then would it not make sure that the teachings are correct? Think about this. In a football game, they have what's called the 2-minute warning. There's only 2 minutes left in the game. Everyone on both sides, they know we have no margin for error. These are the last 2 minutes. We cannot make any error. Don't jump off sides. Don't make any mistakes. Yet, the Watchtower says we're living in the last days. Why would God's organization, and I ask every one of you this question as a critical thinker, why would God's organization be making mistakes on teachings and doctrines, especially if these teachings and doctrines, if you disagree with them, could impact your salvation? When the Watchtower signs God's name on documents, you do not get the change. And so this is just another example of a teaching that has been changed, all again showing they're making it up as they go along. Let me give you another example. The Watchtower taught the separation of the sheep and the goat. For decades, we all knocked on doors believing that this preaching work that we were doing and how people accepted it or rejected it would determine whether they were a sheep or goat. We even taught people all around the world that the angels were helping us to separate the sheep and the goat. And then what did the Watchtower do? They came back and said, no, we told you but we need to change it. How do you do that? How do you do that? Especially when you consider that every Jehovah's Witness would have told any coworker, any relative, and said, your church, your religion does not teach this, that the witness activity is separating the sheep and the goat. And the reason why your church doesn't teach that is because they're teaching a false doctrine in regards to this scripture of separating the sheep and the goat. Well, what does it mean when the Watchtower changes it? When the Watchtower changes what they've been teaching, is that not also a false teaching? And as a result, what do they say? It will take place during the Great Tribulation. Here's a third one. And this is one that I found most interesting. This is a teaching that Jehovah's Witnesses have taught for over 100 years. It's a very familiar one. What is the scripture? This is what it says.
Note Matthew chapter 24 and verse 47, where Jesus said, truly I say to you, he will appoint him over all his belongings.
The way the Watchtower has explained this scripture, and this is what has impacted my life and your life. The Watchtower has taught that in 1914, Jesus Christ returned. First, of course, they say he was coming back to bring Armageddon. That failed. So they flipped it and said, well, he came back invisible and nobody saw it except us. We're the only ones who understand he came back. But along with that, they made the declaration that when Jesus came back, he examined all the religions on the face of the earth. He examined all of them. And then in 1919, he selected the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. Yes, he selected them to be his mouthpiece, the only ones who are authorized to explain the Bible. That's what Jehovah's Witnesses have been teaching for decades, that they were selected in 1919, put in charge of all of Jesus's belongings, all of them. Now, what do they teach now? Today, they have revised it. They revised it to say what? Note what they say here.
The July 15, 2013 Watchtower, tell us when will these things be? Paragraph 18 makes the following statement. So it is reasonable to conclude that Jesus' arrival to appoint the faithful slave over all his belongings, mentioned at Matthew chapter 24, 46 and 47, also applies to his future coming during the Great Tribulation.
Now, this is an interesting question it raises. If they have not been put in charge, why are they acting as if they are? Think about this. You go to work. It's 10, 15 of you working in the same department, same meal, same shop, whatever. And one of the individuals comes up to you and says, I'm in charge, so I'll be sending everybody's schedules, vacation time, leave time, and assignments. Now, on Friday, this was the same guy who was on the same team. All y'all are the same employees, same level, same grade. But on Monday, he comes back and he makes the claim that he is now in charge. He's going to be setting your leave time. He's going to be determining whether or not you get vacation. He's going to be determining what assignments you get. Now, what is the question that everybody in the shop is going to ask? It's a very simple question. Who put you in charge? Now, the way he answers this question after he's been asked that is going to be all the difference in the world. If he says, Mr. Davis, the owner of the company, he put me in charge on Friday afternoon. But if he were to say to you, well, he hasn't put me in charge yet, but I know he's going to put me in charge soon. And when he do, I'll have everything. Y'all would look at him and I would look at him and we would laugh at this fool. And yet this is what the Watchtower, the governing body, is telling all Jehovah's Witnesses. We ain't in charge yet, but we're going to act like it. And we're going to make demands of you and requirements on you as if we are. One of the things that my wife and I did, we called our channel Critical Thinkers because we really believe that's what got us in trouble. That's what got us in trouble. We saw things, we heard things, we read things, but we never, ever thought about it critically. Never. We just discussed 3 teachings that Jehovah's Witnesses have changed. I want you to stop and think about that. Think about what that really means. Think about all of the articles, all of the magazines, all of the publications where these teachings were taught. And along with all of these magazines and where these teachings were taught, think about how many scriptures that the Watchtower embedded into those articles for the purpose of providing support for a teaching that today they know is bogus. All of those scriptures that they used were being used incorrectly because they never supported those three teachings. They never supported them. And yet they had used tons of these scriptures. This is because they are simply making it up as they go along. They're basically guessing. They're nothing more than speculation. And yet they do not want to be challenged or questioned on what we have seen over and over and over again ends up on the trash pile. These are not teachings of God. These are merely opinions of humans who've decided we're going to elevate this to the status of divinity and require people to believe it. This is why we encourage people. Take the time, do your research, do your own studying. Never let someone tell you what you can and cannot read. When someone tells you that your salvation is resting on this, they don't get to make that call. You make that call. And that's what we encourage you to do. So this year's annual meeting, unlike in the past years ago, today they use it as trial balloons to test out new teachings on Jehovah's Witnesses to see how they're going to respond many times. And when they do this, they show literally contempt for the intelligence of their members, who they know will not question and will not challenge. So let's just recap. Point number one, they changed the Great Tribulation teaching. Now anybody can get in. Point number two, separating the sheep and the goat. They're no longer doing that. And of course, the angels are not helping out as well. Point number three, they now teach that they have not been put in charge of Jesus's belongings. They have not been selected by Jesus, is what they're now teaching. Then how do they get to claim that they're the only ones who can speak for God? This is why you have to do your research. No one else can do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. Every good researcher of any type of knowledge knows you can't research someone's own writings with their writings. And yet, as Jehovah's Witnesses, that's what we did. We took the Watchtower publication to reference a Watchtower publication. That is not research. Things known as peer reviewed is how you come to understand knowledge and information. You have to have, as one person says, at least one opposing view to better understand what you are considering at the time. Once again, the Watchtower is always just making up stuff as they go along. This has been JT.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.